Welcome. Today, I thought I would talk about grief, losing my mother. And I'll talk about my own lived experience here, and then I'll talk about it more from the process of grief and what that's like for us to live through it. Now, grief's a really fascinating process to engage with. It's described as a mental illness. How can it be considered to be a mental illness to grieve, particularly when it's the grief for somebody that you really love, like mother? I think that's a terrible shame that we have pathologised something deeply human. However, in 2017, I lost my mum. It was a big surprise. And I was on holiday at the time in India. And when I got the news, it literally felt like a hole was drilled into my stomach. The whole of my body just became empty. I remember falling to the ground and being sick. I was sick. I couldn't believe it. The shock was just unreal. I couldn't wait to get home. Immediately after losing Mum, I felt like a child. I felt like a lost little girl. I felt like Orphan Annie. I remember being at the airport, seeing other daughters with their mums. And I felt envious of that. I felt really envious. I thought, you don't know how precious it is, that time that you've got discussing whether you're going to get a blueberry muffin or a lemon slice. Such a beautiful moment you're sharing there with mother. You can have it. Mine's not here. I can't do that anymore. I can't share a cake with my mum anymore. It was hard. And during that grieving process, I didn't want to talk to anybody really that hadn't lost their mum. Because how could anybody understand my grief if they've not lost a mum? They might have lost somebody else. But if you've not lost mother, you don't understand me. And I don't know if that was fair or not, but I guess that was my way of protecting myself. I didn't want to have my experience of grieving mother be diluted by, oh, you'll get over it, just in case somebody said those kind of things. Time's a healer, all of those things, all very nice, but I didn't want anyone to make it better. I'd lost my mum and I was feeling the pain of it. The problem is that equally, when you lose someone so significant from a family circle, everybody gets thrown into the trenches here. And that made it difficult for me to grieve, because I realised, I've got to grieve my mother, but everyone else is falling to pieces here. What do? I did what I've always done. Shove my feelings to the side and deal with what's happening, what needs to be done. My mum would want me to do that. She wouldn't want me to ignore my feelings, but she would want me to make sure that the others are okay, because we'd have done that together in the past, and now I had to do it on my own without her. And so in many respects, I was going through this grieving process, but I had to keep it quite private at times, because talking about my grief sometimes was uncomfortable for others to hear. So it's been 10 years now, nearly 10 years since mother died, 9 years actually. And one thing that there's been a few peculiar things that I've done. I've got a beautiful jewellery box and a few key pieces of jewellery, sentimental value to me. A couple of key pieces. And I'm happy with that. But my mum was staying at my house when she died. She actually died outside my kitchen window. She had a heart attack. And when I came home, a lot of stuff had been packed up by her partner at the time. And for some weird reason, I was left with 7 pairs of neatly folded knickers by Mum. And they were so perfect looking. I couldn't throw those knickers away, so I kept them in my attic. And I knew they were there, and after a year I was like, oh gosh, this is getting a bit weird now. I've got Mum's knickers in the attic, I need to get them out. And a second year passed and another year passed, and my life just became more and more complicated and difficult, and there was more things happening, and I was getting thrown around, and I was having to deal with all this. I'm a grown girl, I can deal with stuff, but I miss my mum. Some of these really hard passages that I've been through in life, like, Mum's not always had the answer, but she was there. She was there. And so I guess I kept the knickers as a sense of, I've got a little bit of your mum here. And then 6 years passed, and life just continued to be difficult. And whether I had my mother's knickers in the attic or not, it really didn't make a difference in the grief. And I'm still going through the grieving process of my mum. I still miss her dearly. I don't talk about it a huge amount, but I miss her dearly. But I also know that I'm a mother and I've got family, and I thought it was important when I lost my mum that although I can really love my mum and I can miss her, I realised I had to try my very best to be in the present with the people that were alive. When I was a little girl, my grandmother died. I think I was 7 or 8. And this was really significant. A year before my grandmother had died, my grandfather died. He died of a heart attack. My grandmother died a year later. And when my grandmother died, my mum wasn't even 40 at the time. She was in her mid-30s, very young to lose both parents, bless her. My mum fell into a massive depression. And so at 7 or 8, my grandfather had died. And then my grandmother, who my parents worked. I was born in the 70s. Both my parents worked. I was a latchdoor kid. A lot of us were in the 70s. It was totally normal. So my super safe space was my grandmother. And when my grandmother died, the devastation of that to my mum. My mum was there in body, but she wasn't in spirit. And I just have memories of a little girl coming back from school at lunchtime, and I didn't stay at school for dinner. I was too shy. It was too painful. So I'd come home and I could check on Mum, and Mum would be in bed because she was a night nurse. And if she wasn't at home, if she wasn't at work, I just remember Mum being asleep. She was terribly depressed. And I'd take my mum a drink of Horlicks and a flake at lunchtime, and I'd probably have the same for my lunch too, and I'd probably go back to school. So I didn't want to do to my family, I didn't want to die with my mother, because my mother died with her mother, and I completely understood it. But I realised that I needed to remain alive whilst grieving for my mother. And I don't know how well I've done that. But all I can say is I did my best. So it's 9 years, moving on to 10 years since I've lost Mum. The grief's still there. Oh, God, if I could pick the phone up and talk to her now, we'd be on the phone for hours. I miss the conversations. I miss the freedom of just being able to share things and her understanding it. I miss that. But grief's an interesting thing. I could talk a lot about grief. I've experienced a lot of grief. But it's not just the grief of parents and grandparents. Grief happens in lots of ways. And there's some people that they lose their children. Parents that lose their children are like, wow, what's that like? But also I don't think we pay enough attention to the grief of losing people that are still alive. And that can be very difficult. And certainly with trends around estrangement now, that being looked at as some kind of process to stop generational wounds, whereas of course really it's just perpetuating more separation and hatred. But those kind of movements and those kind of agendas running through culture can, of course, increase feelings of grief and disconnection. And so when the really beautiful thing with grief, one of the things that I've really been fascinated with grief is that how do we describe it? How do we pin it down? Because it's such a big mashup of things, isn't it? It's the rawness, the sadness, the memories, the regret. But what sits beneath it all is love, absolute love and appreciation, and the sadness and the loss of that. And so I think that grief can be a really beautiful teacher for us, a teacher in love. And one of the things that I feel like I've really understood from experiencing, I think a lot of grief and a lot of loss is an appreciation for life. And I think that's incredibly important in this world. I make a generalisation here, but I think there's a lot of people are afraid of living because they're afraid of loss. And sadly, we do lose people. People die and people fall out with us and we lose things. We lose a job, we lose the perfect home, we lose the ideas of a future, how we thought that life was going to be. We lose those things. As we get older, we lose the looks, we might lose our elasticity in our skin, we might lose our flat belly, your penis might shrink. There's all these things that we lose. And that's okay, isn't it? Because nothing lasts forever. But when we're losing things, what are we gaining? And that's where we need to put our attention. And I think that grief really does remind us of the importance of expression, connection, and appreciation. Because it really forces us, I think. Let's say it's a beautiful invitation, I think, to being fully present. But I also can see that the grief that I experienced as a little girl, when I lost my grandmother, I can look back from there and I can see that was such a significant point in my life. From a shamanic perspective, we'd call that was certainly a kind of a soul loss experience. The world changed for me then. And I think the little girl that lost a grandmother and her mum was there but not there, I can see now that I became terrified of loss, terrified of losing. I wasn't terrified of me dying, I was terrified of my mother dying. Really terrified of mother dying, because I might end up like my mum. And my mum was so deeply depressed when she lost her mother. And she put a huge amount of weight on. And I look back and I feel really sadness that my mum suffered in that way. She never really got over losing her mother. And I was terrified that I would go absolutely crazy when my mother died. And so when my mother died, despite the fact that I felt hollow inside, that I'd got this huge hole in my stomach and I felt about 5, an abandoned child, one thing I didn't expect was a sense of relief. Because I'm going to worry about mum dying anymore. And I didn't even know how worried I was about that until mother died. Life's peculiar, isn't it? So I think the way I deal with grief is, my mum's not here physically, but she is in spirit and I speak to her. And for me, I feel like I try to keep mum's spirit here, present, by me doing the things that I do that mum would love, to really love, and to do the things that mum couldn't do, that she'd have liked to have done. I doing the things that I do that my mum would have liked to have done, but she couldn't have done it because she was raised in a different time and we were different people, although we were very alike. So, grief, fascinating, very challenging, such a mixture of emotions. And one of the things I found really fascinating by grief, that I experienced from grief, anger. The anger, oh, the anger, wow. The anger that you feel during a grieving process is, that is spicy. And a lot of people struggle with anger. But I'd advise any of you, if you're grieving, acknowledge that anger, because what sits beneath anger is often sadness. And you're okay to be angry. It's not a bad thing. Actually, anger is very beautiful when it's understood and when it's allowed to be processed rather than be repressed and put onto the naughty step. I'll do a podcast on anger. Maybe next. We'll do that next.